Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very, very special Lunch and Learn today. We have a couple of my favorite people in the world who are going to be sharing, Jim and Patty Robinson. Jim and Patty are actually celebrating 49 years of marriage this month. They have a passion for marriage ministry, and you're going to get to hear a little bit more about them. They helped bring a program to Wooddale that will be launching once again in January. We're just a couple of weeks away from this semester of Reengage ending, and if you've never taken Reengage, it's an opportunity for you and your spouse to reconnect, reignite, or resurrect your marriage. And we've seen everything under the sun in Reengage, from people who have come in and said, this is kind of the last hope, and we don't know if our marriage is going to make it, to people who have said, you know what, we're doing really, really well, but we think we could do better, and we just want to grow deeper as a couple. And Reengage is for people no matter the spectrum there. Covers 14 weeks, and over those 14 weeks, you talk about things like communication and conflict resolution, and how do we handle issues like spiritual intimacy and emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy. We talk about just so many wonderful, wonderful topics there, and your marriage, I promise you, will be better if you spend and invest the time in Reengage. And so you can find out about that. You can register for that on the Family Resource website. Many of you have been asking us when the schedule for next semester is going to come out, and it's here. And so I want to just give you just some of the highlights. Next week, we end our this semester of Lunch and Learns with Dale and Marcia Hummel. So 2 weeks in a row on marriage. Dale and Marcia have served as the pastor and pastor's wife here at Wooddale for the last 10 years. And let's go back to that slide. We're really, really excited about them being here next week. And then in January, we start back. Todd Mulliken, who is a favorite speaker here, a marriage and family therapist, will be talking about how to increase forgiveness and release resentments. Ryan Tarman's our 5th and 6th grade pastor, and he's going to be talking about, is there hope for the next generation? And he's actually going to be talking, if you've ever read the books like The Fifth Turning, he's been talking about just generational trends and what we know about generations, and it's a fantastic presentation. Mike Max from WCCO is going to be here in January, and he's just going to do a fun lunch and learn on great stories from Minnesota sports, from covering sports for the last 3 decades in the Twin Cities. It's going to be a great, great lunch and learn. Mike and his wife have been here at Wooddale for 24 years, and he's excited to share with you just some of the fun stories from that. Super easy invite if you have some friends who might be interested in hearing some of Mike's favorite stories over the last 3 years. And then Lee Bailey Seiler ran Celebrate Recovery at Eaglebrook Church, and he's going to be here and talk about, from the perspective of somebody who's been an addict, to help you understand the journey of addiction from somebody who's been there. When we get to February, how to talk to your kids about sex. Heather Fleece, our junior high pastor, is going to be speaking about that. And then Dale and Marcia are back, and this is a topic they've never spoken on. I asked them to do this, intentional grandparenting. Some of you are grandparents and your kids are right here. Some of you, your grandkids are far away, and and that's Dale and Marcia. Like, how do you be intentional when you don't live by your grandkids? Let's go back there again. Sorry, guys. I put some automatic timing. It's not the guys in the back. It's me on my slides. Into Me You See, Jim and Patty. If you like them today, come back the day after Valentine's Day, all right? And if you screwed up on Valentine's Day, guys, come back the day after Valentine's Day, all right? Because we're going to talk about Into Me You See, understanding emotional intimacy in marriage. February 22nd, preparing your marriage for the empty nest years. My wife and I are going to talk about that. And then on February 29th, Terry Miller is going to be here. Terry works for Reach Global for the Evangelical Free Church denomination, is the daughter of a guy named Tom Carell, who was our missions pastor here for years. And she works with missionaries who are coming off the field. So like when they're in their 50s, kind of thinking about how do we prepare for retirement. But what they've put together is so good that all these national organizations are looking at what they've put together for retirement and saying, hey, can we borrow what you're doing? And so she's going to come and just kind of help us think about retirement planning no matter what age you are. In March, we've got some more great presentations. Helping a student who's struggling. Emma Teal is going to be our speaker. She was here last week. Boy, if you missed her last week, I want to encourage you, go online. It was dynamite presentation about how do you be a family-centered versus a child-centered family. And then Because of spring breaks, we're not going to do a March 14th Lunch and Learn. And then March 21st, Tiffany Bobbendreyer is a marriage and family therapist who grew up right here at Wooddale Church. Her family of origin, they fostered or adopted 21 kids. It's an amazing family. But she's going to be talking about attachment versus healthy relationships from the perspective of a counselor. I think you'll love that. 28th is Holy Week. We're not going to do something that week because of everything else happening here at church. In April, we've got a full slate again, and Jill and Brian Dejewski run a ministry that our junior high ministry has been involved with here for years called Mobile Hope. And they're going to be talking about how do you move from good intentions to intentional relationships. Sometimes in our helping and our desire to help others, we really end up hurting. And this is about how do you be more intentional. April 11th, Adam Sidler, our discipleship pastor, is going to talk about how actively listening will lead others to follow. And some of us are really good at maybe you're a manager or a leader at telling people what to do, but not listening so well. And nobody wants to follow that person who never listens. April 18th, loving and helping someone with addiction. The second time we're going to talk about addiction because we think it's really important. We have a ministry here called Celebrate Recovery. And Sinai Thao is our brand new director of that. If you've not met Sinai, his story is incredible. Years and years and years of addiction. And the freedom that he's found is beautiful. He also works at Teen Challenge. And so we kind of share him at Wooddale with Teen Challenge, and they're doing amazing, amazing things. And then April 25th, our Edina campus pastor, Derek Barronwald, is going to talk about how to read the room. And that's a little bit of an opaque title. What it's really about is change management. How do you lead change in an organization, a family, a relationship? And then finally, in May, we are going to be talking about again, Helping Without Hurting with Kathy Gerthofer. Kathy is our Associate Director of the Family Resource Initiative. She's up here a lot of weeks doing the intros, and she is running some amazing ministries of compassion here at Wooddale. It can get really, really easy, though, when you're in ministries of compassion again, to have good intentions but end up doing more harm than good. So May 9th, an introduction to camping for families. This is just another fun one. Dan's a friend of mine who's been here before, and Dan and his family have camped for years. I'm not a camper. I live in Minnesota and I don't camp. And so some of you are like, hey, I'd love to do that, but there's a learning curve that I'm a little bit afraid of. And so it's just kind of an introduction to that as we kind of move toward the summer. May 16th, knowing the difference between passive, assertive, passive-aggressive, and aggressive communication. In other words, how not to be Minnesotan with Todd Mulliken, all right? And then finally, on May 23rd, Pastor John Odom, who is our West Bank campus pastor and pastors at the University of Minnesota, is going to talk about how do you create and instill family values. And I think you're going to love this spring. Summer, we will be doing lunch and learns again, too. The summer lunch and learns are always packed here. We actually have even a bigger attendance sometimes in those summer months because there's less competition. So that'll come out in the future. We'll have handouts for these that'll be produced probably in the next week or two. We may even have them next week at the Lunch and Learn with Dale, okay? With no further ado, because I've taken too much of their time, and if you need 5 minutes extra, you can do it, you two, all right? Let's welcome up Jim and Patty Robinson.
All right. Thanks, Brian. That sounds like quite a lineup. And if any of you don't know Mike Max, he is a great guy. I think you'll really enjoy that. He and I work out at the same club, so it's kind of fun to see him sometimes. All right.
Well, we're going to begin today by taking a survey. So if you agree with this statement, raise your hand. The global pandemic highlighted differences in the opinions of people. Recent Supreme Court decisions highlighted the differences in the opinions of people. Social justice issues have highlighted the difference in the opinions of people. Okay, so most of us understand that political and social issues can act as a lightning rod for conflict. We see people behaving differently than we do, we hear different opinions, and we feel polarized. Well, these lightning rod issues can also occur in your home. Our internal compasses can feel like they're pointing in different directions than that of our spouse. But what might be missing from our thinking is the why. Why are we polarized? And how do these different opinions and behaviors, how do they show up? And what's driving them? And what we believe is driving them are our core values. And those core values take birth in our individual experiences. So if you will just indulge me, close your eyes, and I'm going to read for you a situation. See if you can imagine it. It's November 2021. Bill is a 47-year-old commercial pilot living in New York City. He's married to 45-year-old Marie, who is an ICU nurse at New York City's largest hospital, New York Presbyterian. Marie wants Bill to get a COVID vaccine. Bill refuses. So a conflict begins that is so emotionally laden that it threatens to end their marriage. They're stuck. They're unable to come to a compromise or an agreement, so they make an agreement to see a counselor. What they discover in couples counseling is that the issue is not about the vaccine. The issue is not about getting a shot. The issue is really the core values which drive their decisions and behaviors. Okay, you can open your eyes. Can you imagine it? I think most of us can. So this couple both have closely held values that pointed their internal compasses in different directions.
Okay, so what we're going to do this afternoon, just to get you guys engaged a little bit, and let you do a little bit of work on our hypothetical situation Pat just gave you, is we're going to kind of split the room a little bit. So I'm going to take these tables, starting this one here, and the tables over here. Here's what I want you to do. At your table, there's a list here that says list of values. Okay? So on this side of the room, the tables I just mentioned, I want you guys at your tables to talk about what do you think might be, see if you can come up with 2 or 3 values that might be driving Marie's behavior. What might be underneath and behind her decisions about pushing Bill so much? And the table starting here and on this side, I want you guys to do the same thing, but I want you to talk about, see if you can identify what might be driving Bill's behaviors. What's underneath it, okay? So take a couple of minutes, then we're going to debrief, and I want to see what you come up with, okay? Go ahead. All right, so let's pull back a minute, and let's debrief this a little bit. So what did you think? Were you able to have some conversation and come up with some things? Yeah? Okay. So let's start over here on this side of the room with Marie. So at one of the tables, give me one value that you think Marie might be displaying or driving her behavior. Who wants to start? Anybody want to give me one? All right, so, all right, here, I'm going to let you talk so everybody can hear. All right, here you go. I've got the mic. All right, so you go ahead. What do you think it is?
We said career was driving that.
Okay, so did you guys talk about what that might be like?
Well, she probably was seeing a lot of things in her job. She was probably strongly advised to get it herself, if not required, and therefore maybe felt pressure for her family to as well.
Do the same thing, yeah. Okay, all right, that's good, good. All right, somebody else, what's another one? Did you come up with a different one? You guys have a different one? Who wants to, somebody want to share that from this table? Yeah, okay.
Okay, maybe she valued friendship and health because she's an ICU nurse. So obviously, maybe health is in her values, and then friendship, she didn't want to give up meeting with anyone during that time.
Oh, okay, all right, good. So did you hear all that? It could be health and concern about that, and friendships, right? Not losing touch with people, right? So big value that would drive her. Okay, any others? Anybody else came up with? Do you guys have something you want to share? Yeah, all right, who wants to do it?
We had self-expression.
Okay,
So in other words, they're not able to explain their viewpoint and respect each other's viewpoint.
Oh, that's good. Okay, that's very good. Okay. Any others? Any others anybody else came up with you want to share? Power. Okay, so you want to talk a little more about that?
Well, I think some people have a need to control other people, and especially if they are threatened with job security or something like that. So,
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so it could be a power situation or control situation. Was there another one over here? Yeah.
They were related to her job, because if she gets sick because he didn't get a shot, then she could be out not working. So I put financial stability.
Okay, so it could even be as something as big as financial security in her job, that she could lose her job or something. Yeah, so those are a lot of things that could really drive that behavior, right? All right, let's talk about Bill. All right, so Bill was refusing to do that. So somebody want to start? What's a value? Dave, you have something?
I think independence, you know, and you can couple that with freedom, but independence and freedom, he doesn't want to be pigeonholed or put into a specific box. He wants to be able to make his own decision without somebody telling him what to do.
Oh, yeah, so that might be a big driver for him, right? He wants that freedom of expression and don't tell me what to do, right? Yeah, okay, that's good. All right, yeah.
He's not a risk taker. He doesn't want to take the risk.
Oh, okay, so not willing to take a risk about what may be the side effects or something like that, the implications. Okay, that's good. Low risk. Any others? Any others that you came up with for Bill? Those are good. Anybody else want to share one? Okay, okay.
Give me a chance, would you? I got a lot of them here. It's controversial, right? I love this kind of stuff. I put faith on being controversial.
Okay, so say more about that.
Well, so this obviously happened during the pandemic. Some people took a view that their faiths, trusting in the Lord and trusting in the Lord that I didn't need the vaccine, that the Lord would take care of me and I would be healthy without it, and took that view. And other people were adamant that that wasn't correct. But it was a sort of a faith view. Where does your faith fall into all of this?
Okay, so it could be really deep in a faith issue for you, right? Okay. Any others anybody wants to share from Bill's standpoint? Any others? Okay. Well, so it's interesting, isn't it? So on the surface of it, it just seems like a big conflict that gets them all the way into a counselor's office because they can't resolve it. It's like, is it just on the surface? It's like, well, you either take it or you don't take the vaccine, or, well, is it safe or it's not safe, or, well, they have side effects, or, no, there's no side effects, or, well, is COVID even real? Well, of course it's real, right? But when you get down underneath it, there's really a lot of other stuff that's kind of driving that, right? It's not maybe just what it appears on the surface. So what we want to do in the time that we've got with you this afternoon is, let's see if we can get this to go. Come on. No. There we go. So here's what we want to try to accomplish this afternoon is we want to, first of all, give each of you an opportunity to at least begin the process of identifying what are maybe your top 5 values. We want to discuss with you common value differences that happen in relationships, particularly marriage, right? Because that's our focus. And then the last thing is we want to discuss some strategies for you about, well, how do you deal with these differences that you come up with, particularly in a marriage, just like what Bill and Marie were going to have to deal with, right? So what we're going to start with, we've got a little video that we want to show you, because the place to start is, well, let's start with what is a value, right? What does that even mean when we talk about a value, and where do they come from? So we're going to start with that, and let's go back.
How do you work out your personal values? Values are like a compass that guide us and help us to make our decisions. They are the principles and beliefs by which we live our lives. So if you want to effectively lead yourself and lead others, then you need to be aware of what those values are. But first, what do we mean by value? Well, value denotes a degree of importance. In monetary terms, we set a value on something by how much we're willing to pay for a product or service. In moral terms, a value is an ideal that we give a high degree of importance to. Values are the moral code that guide us and the priorities that motivate us. If you do not know what your values are, then it's very likely that you are living your life, whether you know it or not, according to other people's principles and priorities. So how do you assess your core values? You can do an assessment of your own values by examining different aspects of your life and for looking at trends. In my experience, it's good to start with examining our personal stories, our priorities, passions, and principles. So let's look at each of those in turn. Personal stories. One of the most instructive ways you can examine your character and values is by looking at the stories in your life. Have a think about, when have you been most happy? Which achievement or experience are you most proud of? What has been your biggest success? What has been your biggest failure? What do you fear most? Which thing in your past are you most ashamed of? When reflecting on a personal story, you can analyse further by asking, what was the situation? What role did you have to play and what did you do? And then what was the underlying principle that made this a good or bad experience? Next, let's look at priorities. We've already seen that values and priorities are linked. One simple and effective way to examine our priorities is to see how we use our resources. Simply put, we invest our time and money in what we value. So for money, think about, where does your cash go? Money provides a very tangible expression of what we prioritise. Have a look at your bank account and credit card bills and examine where your money goes. What do you choose to spend more or less on? Time is a truly finite resource. How you spend your time will give you a good indication of what you really value. Take a look at your diary or think back and work out the amount of time that goes to various activities each day and each week. Next, we look at passions. Our passions are the things that drive us emotionally. Our passions either draw us towards or away from something or someone. Often we don't realise these thoughts and they go unnoticed, but if you reflect on your thoughts and your dreams, beliefs and influences, then you'll gain a deeper understanding of your passions. So think about, what are you hoping to achieve in life? When you daydream, what is it about? Imagine that you could have one wish that could be immediately fulfilled. What would it be? What are your theological, metaphysical, philosophical or political beliefs? What are the values of the politicians or political parties that you vote for? When something goes wrong, what or who do you turn to for answers and support? There are many external influences on our lives, and predominantly these are people we know or respect. Think about the following. Who do you follow? Who do you want to be like? What are the books and stories you like most? What are the principles of your family and friends? And that leads us nicely on to principles. Having thought about your personal stories, priorities and passions, you should be in a much better place to assess what your principles really are. What trends do you see appearing, and which words help to sum them up? These should be your principles. The list of words that we could use to express our values is almost endless, but sometimes we can struggle to come up with just the right one. If you want some help, there's a list of more than 150 common principles on the Right Questions website. Just follow the link attached. Once you've looked at your personal stories, priorities, passions and principles, then you need to pick the 3 to 5 most important principles. These are the core principles, the key ones that help you to make those really tough decisions. Once you know your values, you can use them to guide you in making decisions, setting goals and living a more fulfilling life. This is just a summary. There is more you can do in refining and ranking these values, so if you want more help, then do follow the links to more in-depth posts that are on the website, www.therightquestions.co.
In terms of how do you determine that, and this is where we're going to dig into it the rest of the afternoon, with our time with you, is our personal stories, what our priorities are, what our passions are, and what our principles are.
So the video talked about what values are. I want to talk for just a minute about what they are not. They are not personal preferences. So I like warm, cozy socks. Jim likes cotton, stretchy socks. That is a preference. I like steak. Jim likes fish. However, under that preference is a value, because Jim highly values his health. He eats fish. So sometimes even our preferences are driven by our values. So it's what motivates us to take action. Our values motivate our actions. So they act as a guide or a guiding line for our behavior. So if we think in terms that our life is a ship, values are the rudder that steers the ship. And oftentimes, our values may be unwritten or unspoken. You may have unspoken values. So several years ago, Jim and I did a value exercise where we were identifying our top values. And we both came up with reputation as a top value. This shocked us. We weren't aware of it. And so we asked our two sons, we said, hey, did you know that reputation was really important to us? And their response was, they rolled their eyes and they said, duh. And then our oldest son, Kyle, said, you always said, carry your name proudly, represent yourself and your family well. So we were unaware that we had even said those things. It was just part of our normal life. And we realized that sometimes values are better caught than taught. But I'm wondering, do you have any unspoken or unwritten values? Let's give you 1 minute just to think about it. What is something you do that drives your behavior that is driven by a value that you have that maybe you haven't shared with anyone? Well, and then are you living congruent to your values? So often when our lives feel out of sync, when we are living incongruent to our values, when we don't live out our values, we can feel bored, stuck, overwhelmed. For example, my very top value is family. So when we are overscheduled and we're away from our family for a long period of time, I just feel off. I feel out of kilter. Jim highly values physical fitness. So when he hasn't gone to the health club to work out for a while, he's out of kilter. He's off. So knowing when you feel off that maybe it's a value that you're not living out can be very helpful in redirecting your life. And actually knowing about your spouse, it can help you redirect your approach toward them. So sometimes our values compete. So think about this. Let's say I have beauty and a pleasant home environment as one of my top values. But another one of my top values might be being thrifty. So now I'm at conflict within myself. Do I spend time and money redecorating the house to make it beautiful because I highly value that pleasant environment? Or does my value of thrift win out? Well, a lot of times, a third value will determine what we choose. So maybe my value of reputation will win out, and I redecorate the house. So another way to test your values and to know what they are is to know that when they aren't displayed by other people, you will be irritated. So I highly value hospitality. When I go to a restaurant or a hotel and I encounter a rude or arrogant host, I am really irritated. I mean, in my world, everyone should value hospitality, right? So it helps us to identify our top values when we even think about what's irritating to us.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to give you guys a chance to start this process for yourselves, all right? So on those same sheets that you use with the little exercise we did with Marie and Bill, there's that whole list of values. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to kind of go through and start thinking about it on an individual basis, okay, about what might be my top values. Now, I want to give you some things that maybe will help you as you go through this process, okay? So let me get to the next slide. Okay, so here's some questions that I put up here that you can kind of ask yourself when you're going through and looking at values, trying to decide. So the first one is, when this value was displayed or has displayed, it really is my most authentic self. What value would I kind of pound the table for? It's so important, right? I wouldn't be able to kind of fully live if I didn't have this value in my life. 25 years from now, I'm still going to value this. That's how important it is to me. And does this value draw me away or toward another person? And then the last one is, do I spend my time and money on this value? And what I would say to you is, as you're going through this, don't put a value on your values. Sometimes we look at values and think, oh boy, I should have this one, or I shouldn't have that one, or ooh, I don't feel good about that one. Values aren't good or bad. They just are, right? But sometimes we put a perceived value out there. Let me give you an example. We may perceive that patriotism is a good value to have. And a part of patriotism is you should vote. But if you haven't voted in the last 6 elections, yeah, it's probably not a high value for you, right? So it's just a perceived value. So you have to make a distinction between what is a perceived value you have and what's an actual value. So as you go through, you've got those questions. The other thing you can think about as you look at something that you want to circle is this really, really me? Or is it just kind of me? Or, yeah, that's not me at all. So take the ones that aren't me at all and kind of me, just take those away and really focus on these ones that you say, yeah, that really sounds like me and these questions apply, and just circle that. Right? So circle that, go through that, and then what we'll do is we're going to come back and talk about it. So I'll give you about 5 minutes. You may not get through the whole thing, and that's okay, because you can take it home, you can work on it later, but we want to at least give you the opportunity to start that process. So go ahead, we'll give you 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll break and see how it goes for you.
Nothing? So it drove your behavior because nothing ventured, nothing gained. He was encouraging you to be a risk taker, which is a value that drove your behavior. So it was a value because it drives behavior. Very good.
That's good.
Okay. So how do we drill this down? Why was this family value so important? So ask your spouse or your children, are your top values ones that were passed from generation to generation? And how long have they been passed on? Do we have generational values that are in conflict? We see this often when people are coming from different cultures, right? And do you know the story of why this was held dear in your family? And did the value develop because you had an unmet need? Like Eric, who was in poverty. He probably made a vow to himself, my children will never experience that. They will never experience not being able to go to college because of funding. So that became a high value. Education became a high value. Okay.
All right, so the other piece of this is, so in trying to understand it, is how do we see ourselves in the world and how do we fit into it? So what we want to do is we want to show you a short little video. It's from our favorite dysfunctional family, from Everybody Loves Raymond. I want you, if you're familiar with that show, so we're going to watch Marie. And I want you to watch for Marie, and I want you to think, as you're watching, what might have been some family values that were passed along, what might have been a family mantra, and what might be some of her core values in this.
Watch Home Alone.
Take off your shoes.
The Santa Claus.
Take your shoes off. You're not in the barn.
Christmas.
Do what she says. We'll give you a carrot.
Well, what's going on?
Okay, you see, Marie, this is what I'm talking about. You're so obsessed with the house being clean. Look what you're doing to your son.
All right. Fine. Put your shoes back on and gallop around here all you want.
What?
Put them back on.
Yeah, check the expiration date on your feet.
What are you doing?
Everyone wants me to change. I can change. I'm taking the covers off.
Well, where are we going to sit?
You can sit right here on the couch. I don't care about these things anymore. I'm nothing if I'm not flexible.
What are you saying, Marie? We can sit on the couch?
Be my guest, Frank. Go ahead.
So, we can really sit there? On the actual couch?
Go ahead, enjoy.
You first.
Would you sit? It's a couch.
You see, Deborah, I can change. I can let go. It's nice fabric, isn't it?
It's very nice.
I feel a little naughty.
Can't wait till summer.
Hey, what about you, Marie? You spent all these years knocking yourself out cleaning. You should enjoy this.
That's right. Thank you, Deborah. Excuse me? This is nice.
Put the plastic back on.
No, what are you doing?
Look, you don't understand.
You can put the cover back if you want. You know, do whatever makes you happy. My family comes first. You might want to take those cushions outside and shake them out first.
Okay, she's a piece of work, isn't she? All right, so what do you think? What do you think might have been driving Marie's behavior, right? What are some of the things, the values we've talked about today? What do you think? Control? Yeah, control. Sure, absolutely control, right? Cleanliness, what do you think a family mantra might have been from her family growing up over the years, right? Well, that's kind of what Pat said earlier. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? You know, and it's more important than what her kids are doing and who can sit and where you can sit and all of that kind of stuff, right? And how do you think she saw herself in the world? What did you think you saw, maybe how she saw her role? Any thoughts about that? See, the backstory on part of this is Marie's always wanted to teach Deborah, Ray's wife, about how to be a better housekeeper, about how to clean, right? She's always complaining to Deborah about how her house looks because it's never clean. So she sees herself,
Her role in the world is being, I've got to be a teacher. I've got to pass on this value that I have that's so important, right? And so you see how it plays out. So it's just kind of a funny way of looking at it, but to think about how do these things really play out in our everyday lives?
And what happened when the boys went against that value? They were pretty uncomfortable when they went against the family value. So pick your battles. That's another strategy. So ask yourself, where can I bend or compromise when it comes to these values of my spouse being different? We experienced a difference of values in our life when our son asked to play traveling baseball. Jim highly valued teamwork and physical endeavors, and these values were birthed in his family of origin because his dad was a baseball coach. He played baseball through college. It was a very important, sports were a very important part of their family life. He valued sports. He valued teamwork. Well, I grew up in a household of 4 girls, and women's sports were not very prevalent. So we never played sports. My parents never played sports. So when Jim came and said, I really want our boys to do traveling sports, I said no. And I disagreed. But they kept asking, and so I thought I need to compromise. So I did agree to try it for a year. Now, the interesting part of this story is that who do you think over time became the world's biggest high school baseball fan? Me. When I embraced what Jim valued, I was enriched. I became so passionate about baseball, high school baseball, that I served on the Boosters Club. And not only for baseball, but for football. You know, sometimes we reject the values of our spouse just because we haven't experienced it or we don't understand that value.
Okay, so last point, and then we're done, is it's this idea about acceptance. Acceptance of the differences. There's going to be differences. You don't have to always line up with each other's values. In fact, you probably won't. So a big piece of this is accepting it and trying to, as we've talked about today, understanding that. So when you do this, part of this acceptance, think about how you relate to your spouse. Think about 4 things. We need to relate with respect, with humility, with empathy, and with goodwill toward each other. Those 4 things, okay? Respect, humility, empathy, and goodwill. You do that, you'll be able to work through and understand and probably do a better job of accepting each other's differences with this. So those are some of the kind of the strategies that we've kind of laid out for you today in terms of how do you deal with this if you've got these differences that are causing some conflict for you. So,
So just one more thing, just to pivot just for a moment. When we talk about our values can show up in different areas of our life. So we may have different values at work than we have for our relationship. So, for example, our values at work might be to succeed, to be a good leader, to develop our career, to climb the ladder, whatever those values might be, to achieve might be a value at work. But in our home life, in our relationship, our values might be affection, deep connection, quality time. So I've given you a second value sheet, and please take this home and talk it over with your family members, with your spouse. What is it that they value most highly within the relationship? Is it romance or reliability? What is it? So ask them to identify their top 3 relational values. Do this with your kids and your spouse. So then ask, are we living congruent to our relationship values? So we just didn't have time for you to complete this exercise today, but I think you'll find it helpful if you can take it home and talk about that, and then also employ the 5 points that we tried to make for you today. Thank you.
All right. I know we went a little long today, and that was my introduction at the beginning, so I apologize for that. But I do want to leave time if two of you have questions today that you just would love for these guys to address. If you got a question, raise your hand. Otherwise, we'll move on. Yeah.
Yeah, when I went over this long list of values, I got close to 20. And so the question is there value in trying to get a top 5 or some number like that?
Yes, I would say yes, there is value in doing that.
Yeah, what you might find helpful is because these are the things that drive, these top 5 values drive our behavior. So think about where your time and money goes, first of all. That's a good test. Think about what you pound the table for, what you'd sell the farm for. And I think it'll help you refine those top values.
Yeah, it's a really helpful exercise. My financial planner did a similar thing with my wife and I. And so the first time we went with him, he had a pack of what looked like playing cards. But the playing cards were just 52 values that we had to then put in order. And so I probably valued 25, 30 of the things in there. But to get down to what are those top 5 things, and then how does that impact how we think about finances, and to see how different my wife and I were in there was a super helpful thing. So yeah, anytime you can do that, it's great. All right, last exercise, or last question. Anybody else? Well, we so appreciate Jim and Patty. And again, I want to just let you know, if you enjoyed this, you would love Reengage. You really would. And if you haven't done that yet, I want to encourage you to consider that no matter where your marriage is at. This is the type of teaching that we get regularly. In fact, we had Jim and Patty, I got them twice this week because they taught at Reengage on Tuesday night, and it really is a blessing. If you'd like more information about that, you can see me. Actually, right over here is Stephanie Teal. Stephanie, you want to wave? Stephanie is our director at Reengage at this time, and she'd love to talk with you about that program as well. Okay, thank you for being here. Next week, Marriage Matters, one more time with Pastor Dale and Marcia. Hope you can make it, all right? See ya.